and welcome to the panel that we're having here on web services, buy versus build. We have a distinguished panel here, and let me make the introductions. First of all, I'm Eric Weicker. I'm the Director of Product Management for the Virtual Earth platform, and the participants here today to talk about their decisions they've made in their own companies, whether it was buy versus build or if they're a platform provider, about what they offer and why companies choose their services, is here ready to share their insights. This is going to be an interactive session, hopefully, so we'll be looking to questions from the audience, so be thinking about what you want to hear. I'll throw in a few questions as well to get things started, but we need your help to make this an interesting session. And so first of all, what we're going to do is introduce each of the participants, and they'll have a chance to give you a brief overview of their business. Brief overview of their business in terms of the web service they use and what their product is. Can you all hear me? Okay. And so starting on your far right, we have Don McCaskill from SmugMug. He's the CEO and Chief Geek. Sitting next to him, Matt Goyer, Product Manager from Redfin. And then we have Jeff Barr, the Senior Web Services Evangelist from Amazon, and George Moore, the General Manager for the Windows Live platform. So why don't we start at the end with Don and hear about SmugMug.
So I'm the founder, one of the two founders of SmugMug. We're a popular premium online photo sharing site. All of our customers are pay customers, so there's no free accounts or anything. And we're somewhere sort of in the middle of the stack with respect to web services. We outsource like a lot of our infrastructure to Amazon using S3, for example. But we also provide our own web services API, and there are thousands of people who build their businesses or applications or whatever on top of our web service. So, and then we also consume stuff from Google and Yahoo as well. So the stack sort of continues to grow. People who are building on top of SmugMug are also, at the same time, without even knowing it, building on Amazon and Google and Yahoo. We have the Amazon piece in particular seems to be really interesting to a lot of people. So we store more than 200 terabytes up on Amazon S3, and it saved us a lot of money. We've been using it for 12 months, and we estimate our cost savings are somewhere around the $1 million mark. And we do a lot of traffic to Amazon. The other web services we consume include Maps at Google, Geocoder at Yahoo, and a few other smaller ones here and there.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a product manager at Redfin. Redfin's an online real estate brokerage, and when you come to Redfin, we have a search experience built around a map, and you use the map to find the real estate you're interested in. Once you've decided on a home that you want to go see, we have field agents who show you the home. And then when you're ready to make a purchase, you come back to our website. You actually make the offer online, and we handle it through acceptance, negotiation, inspection to close. When it comes to build versus buy, initially we had built our own map platform, and then recently in January we switched over to using Virtual Earth for a number of different reasons. We can talk about those later. But we also outsource some other components, such as our geocoding, to a different company that's not Virtual Earth. And then initially when we first built our company, we brought in a lot of the data feeds ourselves. So we would directly contact multiple listing services for listings, or we'd work directly with the county for tax information. And slowly, we're trying to get out of that business of working with a huge number of data providers and instead focusing on data aggregators who can do that hard work of working with the MLSs for us. So.
All right, so I'm Jeff Barr. I'm the Senior Web Services Evangelist at Amazon Web Services. Been doing developer evangelism at Amazon for almost 5 years now, and I basically go out and I speak to user groups and conferences and meet with individual developers all over the world. At Amazon, we've been taking parts of our corporate infrastructure, wrapping external APIs around them, and making them available to outside developers, and inviting developers to come in and build tools, applications, and businesses around what we do. We have a line of 10 different web services ranging from what people think of as the very obvious one, which would be access to our product catalog, to a set of services built around our Alexa.com web metrics subsidiary, to a set of services that we group into a category that we call web scale computing. Infrastructure services like the Elastic Compute Cloud, where you rent servers from us by the hour, S3 storage, where you can store essentially any amount of data you throw up into the S3 cloud and is then stored reliably and redundantly in Amazon servers, queuing services for inter-process communication, and the Mechanical Turk, a service for basically access to human processing power available all over the world.
I'm George Moore. I'm the general manager in the Windows Live platform piece. My team is responsible for the public set of APIs for all of you to actually make use of with respect to our horizontal broad services around search and virtual earth and contacts and presence and photos and things of this nature.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'll start it off, and what I'd like to hear, first of all, from those who have decided to either build or buy, what were the top 3 reasons that went into your decision, and just give us an overview of what the thought process was there and how you made that decision.
With S3, we chose to buy, and we did so for a number of reasons, but the biggest is that we don't consider doing storage or really anything in our data center to be core to our business. It's just like a necessary evil that we have to get good at. So we built our own internal replicated, redundant, scalable file system internally, and it was fairly easy to manage and maintain and everything, but nowhere near as easy as Amazon, and nowhere near as reliable. We don't have as much experience as Amazon does at doing it. So when they came knocking with unbelievable pricing, utility, really easy to understand pricing as well as cheap, it was a no-brainer for us to try it out. As far as why we build our stuff, I'm not entirely sure we have a good reason other than I'm a geek and it's cool to expose my stuff with APIs and watch people build interesting things. Every time we've tried to do a cost analysis of whether we're making money on our API, we just throw up our hands, we're not sure. But it's a lot of fun and our customers like it, so I guess that's reason enough.
We found that developers spend about 70% of their time doing these very unglamorous but necessary evil kinds of things, setting up data centers, putting infrastructure together, arranging for power and bandwidth and cooling, and all those very, very unattractive but necessary things to have to do. Our thinking was, what if we're already doing that for our own purposes? We've got data centers with enormous scale. Wouldn't it be cool if we could simply give developers the benefit of being able to build on top of that and take away a lot of things that they would otherwise have to worry about? Give them these large-scale services as essentially solved problems. So I think back to early in my career when dealing with floppy disk drives at the level of individual bits and having to go in and tune those things with oscilloscopes so all those bits came off, to the point 25 years later where we've got S3 and you simply throw data at us and you take no more concern about your data than I stored it there, it came back, I got a URL for it. The rest of it is simply things I just don't have to worry about. I can be creative, I can be innovative, I can do the fun parts of my application rather than worrying literally about the bits.
Yeah, the bit about doing the fun parts really resonates with us. When we were building our own map application, we had to spend a lot of our time acquiring the imagery and piecing it together and building these image pyramids. And then we found as a small startup that when the one person who's responsible for building that leaves the company and there's no transfer of knowledge, you're in a very tough place. And so we found that we had an application that we could no longer maintain going forward. Whenever someone tried to touch it, it was a fragile entity, and we'd introduce way more bugs than we ever fixed. We also had a business development problem of we just didn't have enough people to go out and acquire the imagery and the information to overlay on top of the map that we needed to make our experience successful. And so it was a really simple decision to say, throw up our hands and say, we need to get out of this business and go to someone who is in the business of building high-quality maps that have a wide breadth of imagery and as well as a wide depth of imagery, which is one of the reasons why we chose to go with Virtual Earth.
So I'll answer it also from Jeff's perspective as a provider of these services. It was actually a nice analogy with the floppy disk. It sort of goes back to, if you think of the state of the market today with all these multiplicity of vendors all providing different services that have different interfaces, different licensing conditions and such, it's really kind of like the late 80s and such when you had a software vendor who wanted to ship a reasonably complex application and had to go out and license a printer driver stack or a memory manager or a graphics driver or a network stack. And it was very complex to put that together. There were technical incompatibilities, there were licensing incompatibilities, and when higher level operating systems like Windows came along, it provided these broad horizontal services around graphics and printers and things that people could just readily build upon. And I believe that's what we're actually saying here, is that there's a lot of very broad horizontal applicability services like storage, like mapping, like contacts, like photographs and things of this nature that we're providing for people to build upon.
Great, thanks. Next question for the panel. From the consumer of services side, I'm interested in now having taken a dependency on a provider, what are the issues that you're facing and how are you mitigating those? If you've decided to build it on your own, what are the similar issues that you have now that you're on your own and you don't have someone else to look to for that? And then maybe from the provider side, you know, what's the story that you have that can make someone who takes a dependency on you for your services feel okay about that and be able to build, you know, a real commercial enterprise on top of a platform?
So as far as like, you know, our dependency on Amazon, we were scared about that in the beginning. When we first put it into production, it was purely secondary storage. We were using it as a backup. We weren't totally sure how fast it would be, how reliable it would be, and all of those sorts of things. But even just doing it in sort of a halfway fashion was good for our business, so we were okay, you know, trying it out. And I used to actually, one of our previous companies competed head-to-head with Amazon. There was a company called FatBrain.com, and so we got to see firsthand just how good Amazon was at their systems and what a vicious competitor they were. So that sort of, in this new incarnation, made us feel really good about trusting our data there. As time went on, and they ended up being more reliable than our own internal storage, which I consider to be quite reliable, it became easier and easier to sort of take more and more steps towards being fully dependent on Amazon. So that's where we are now. Amazon is our primary storage. They hold all of our bits, and you know, that's still a little bit scary, but after a year, it's much less scary than it was. I think it would be great if there were other players in the field, not only just to sort of keep a fire under Amazon's feet so they continue to improve the service and drive prices down and things like that, but you know, because we might decide to use two at once. You know, so we could store every byte at Microsoft and Amazon, or Google and Microsoft, or whatever. If we have a lot of choice and we can sort of mix and match and blend where it makes the most sense, I think I win and Amazon wins and Microsoft wins and everybody wins.
Go ahead.
All right.
So when we decided to switch to Virtual Earth, some of the nice things about taking that dependency was that we were no longer in the business of acquiring imagery. We didn't have to worry about updating it. Microsoft would update it at its own leisure, and that was fine with us. In terms of SLA, we weren't actually that stressed out about what SLA commitment we were going to get from Microsoft. We were sure that their SLA would be much higher than our SLA. We're a small company. We have a one-person network operations team, so there's definitely a guarantee that their service will be more reliable than ours. Some of the problems we ran into, though, are that you no longer control the quality and the data, which for the most part is fine. I'm sure they invest a lot more heavily in QA than we ever did in terms of building their map platform. But when a customer reports to us that, you know, this neighborhood name on the map is actually in the wrong location, there's nothing we can do about it. We can send an email to their tech support and say, hey, I think you put the downtown label over the wrong part of the city, and hope that sometime in the future they'll pick up a fix. But it won't be as immediate as if we had controlled it ourselves. One of the other problems we've been sort of struggling with over the past couple of months is performance. Our customers have sent us hundreds of emails about our poor performance of our website. We've done everything possible on our end to improve that. But now we have this dependency on virtual Earth, and we sort of struggled with how do we get them to take performance as seriously as we're taking performance. And so that's something that wasn't in our initial decision matrix, and we wish it was. But at the same time, working with a provider, we hope that they're very responsive, and we can work together on solving some of these problems.
All right, let's see. First, I love Don's use of vicious as a compliment. That's great. So we've been working with consumers for close to 12 years, and so we've built up this great reputation among people that buy from us that they seem to like our site. They like the fact that it's always there and it seems to stay running. And one of the things, that reputation carries over nicely into the developer world, where developers have often been early adopters of online purchasing. They're good customers of ours. They recognize that we seem to know how to build the site and to keep it running and to run it fast. When we can actually go and we can say, look, the same people that are running the data center that keeps Amazon.com running are the same people running S3 and the other services, and that it's shared infrastructure, shared networking, shared experience, shared knowledge. Developers very quickly realize that this is something that is a formidable asset to have on their side, and that if they're not going to use it, they're probably competing against somebody that is. And they look and say, these are pretty big, meaty problems Amazon has solved, and they'd rather just take advantage of those and use what we've built than to look and say, what's it going to take to build this from scratch, not only at the moderate size that they might be able to afford initially, but they say, what if I succeed beyond my wildest dreams? How do I scale up from storing a couple hundred gigabytes to storing hundreds of terabytes of data?
So from our perspective, it's actually kind of analogous to the SmugMug gentleman in the sense that we already have these first-party services. We already have and have had Windows Live Messenger, Spaces, Hotmail, and things like this running as a consumer-facing entity for a very long time. And they're already running at massive internet scale. We have something like 500 million address books in our contact store with 30 billion contact records. And in Spaces, in the photographs, the new APIs we're exposing now, we have 4 billion photographs in our store with 8 million new photographs uploaded each day from our consumers. So exposing APIs from that is actually, the developers can take knowledge from the fact that the underlying services have been running at consumer-facing scale for quite some time. And it's sort of like the decision you made around just exposing your services up. You still have your first-party, your own experience that your customers consume, but you just decided, hey, it'd be great to expose the APIs and enable the broader ecosystem. So we've been doing that. The thing we're announcing actually today or at the show are a set of new terms that it makes it easier for people to actually make that dependency upon us by actually saying we're announcing both what the predictability of the pricing model will be, so you have assurance in the future as to what your cost structure will be based upon metrics that are important to you around unique users or search queries or whatever the case is, as well as standing up and saying we will offer multi-year service commitments and guaranteed SLAs, dedicated technical support, things of this nature, of course, for a fee. But if you actually are building your business on top of our system and you're actually taking that dependency, then we're actually able to offer contractual terms around continuity of the service, that we're not going to just arbitrarily bring it down, SLAs and such.
So that's actually interesting, because we get asked a lot about SLAs on our web services, and people who read my blog and are aware that we are heavy users of S3 ask us about Amazon's SLA too. And neither Amazon nor SmugMug provides SLAs for our web services yet. I'm not entirely sure if SmugMug ever will, and obviously I can't speak for Amazon. But it's interesting to see companies starting to move towards that direction, where it's not just necessarily paying for a service and building your business on it, but getting some sort of contractual agreement back. I know that's really important for medium and large-sized businesses in particular. Small businesses like ours, we can sort of, have a gut check to see, do we trust Amazon? Yes, we do. Okay, let's move on this. But a lot of people's jobs at larger companies hang in the balance, right? If they make a bad decision on a web service that turns out to be slow or unreliable, they could lose their job and their career could be damaged and everything. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens over time as SLAs and contracts and performance metrics and stuff get built into these web services.
I think the whole issue of SLAs is really interesting because at first when people started asking us about them, the impression I had was that they wanted SLAs with time units of things like microseconds and milliseconds in them, and how quickly could we respond to individual requests and things like that. But over time, it's clear that what kind of SLAs they want actually have time units like months and years and decades in them that say, how long will you guys promise to be around? And so what we've been doing is we've been soliciting as much different input and feedback as we can from our community and trying to use that to synthesize what is the right approach to providing SLAs. And I actually look forward to seeing what Microsoft has done and seeing what we can learn from that as well.
And that's an interesting comment because we don't actually have a lot of concern that Microsoft will discontinue Virtual Earth. We're fairly confident that it's a service that's going to be around. We're actually right now more worried about the microsecond level SLA and how quickly can we get an image tile and how quickly and how small is the JavaScript we're downloading from Microsoft. All that stuff is weighing pretty heavily on our mind right now, and there's no language in our contract with Microsoft that says your JavaScript file is going to be 100 kilobytes and it's not going to grow beyond 10% a year or something like that, which is something that if we could go back is stuff that we'd think about and take into consideration. But I think we're all sort of at the forefront of this and trying to figure out the right relationship to be in with a service provider.
Yeah, let's do one more for the panel and then take questions from the audience. And I think a good follow-on to this last discussion, we'll start with George this time, would be what's the operating relationship that is in place that you currently have between the company that's taken the dependency and the provider? How do you interact around these types of requests, whether it be a performance, new features? What does that engagement model look like? And then maybe more from the panel is what would you like it to be? So let's talk about a little bit around what's there, how do you actually get it done, but what would be more optimal, so we get a little bit peek at what the way things should be.
Okay, so just to level set, the only product we have with commercial terms today in market is actually the Virtual Earth product around SLAs and such. So happy to take questions about that, or Eric can as well. But the other services we announced around live contacts, spaces, photographs, presence, things like these are alpha level services. We're just exposing the APIs literally now, today. And there's actually talk, I believe, immediately after this, talking about how to actually interact with these. So what we're actually announcing is that when these services emerge from alpha and beta and into production, then we will offer the service level agreements for service uptime as well as service continuity agreements, meaning multi-year service commitments to say we will in fact run this service, we will provide this API over a multi-year time period. So if you're building a new business that is going to rely upon this, you can actually have some backing based upon whatever your funders may require in terms of funding your business.
All right, let's see. On our side, we just like to get a lot of input from our developers. And this is not at all limited to business terms, but the more different communication vehicles developers use to talk to us, the happier we are. We love to read blog posts. Don writes all kinds of awesome blog posts that often seem to mention us. Whenever we go out, I often see the conference talks that we do. The ostensible reason you do them is to kind of go out and broadcast your message. But to my way of thinking, the conference talks are simply to open up conversations so I can hear back from our developers and potential developers in the audience. Blog posts, we listen in our developer forum. And so that gives us good feedback from the people actually using our services. Now, the piece that is always the hardest to collect is you don't get the people that might have looked at your terms and said, there's something so wrong with these, they're just going to walk away. It's really hard to find the people that abandoned you totally. So you have to kind of look at your feedback and say, this is from people that have already bought into the system to a certain extent. And we have to rely on more the personal contacts to get the ones that are just so turned off by whatever you do that they just simply refuse to engage. But hopefully if we're all listening to the majority, then we're not so far off that we're scaring lots of people away.
Initially, we started off with Virtual Earth having our two business development people talking to each other, and then the developers and the product managers were sort of left in the dark to feel their way around the SDK. And we had access to a technical support alias, which was very responsive, and their documentation was great. But with this new age of blogs and communication, it wasn't long before we were reading their developer blogs, they were reading our blogs, and pretty soon, the guys from Redmond came down to our offices, and we had developers talking to developers. We were all able to get on the same page, which was really valuable. I had a second thought.
We'll come back to you.
Oh, I was going to say the sneakiest thing we actually did with respect to understanding Virtual Earth was to hire away one of the developers from the Virtual Earth team. But that's always a tricky thing to do. But it's definitely gone a long way to helping us improve understanding about Virtual Earth and definitely some of the business decisions that go on in that business unit that we don't necessarily have insight into, and just helping us understand their business more is good.
So with Amazon, we got really excited when they called us and let us have a preview look at the beta version because we'd love to not even have data centers if we could do it. I'd love to just focus on the customer experience and customer support and all of that sort of stuff. We've been really vocal back to them, both in public on my blog and message forums and stuff, and in private through the Developer Advisory Council at Amazon and emails and everything, about not only what features we'd like to see on S3, but what other services they can provide that can, I can slice pieces of my data center off and stick them on Amazon instead. Yeah, we give them a lot of feedback. I don't know if we are the largest consumer of S3, but if we're not the largest, we're one of the largest at Amazon. So I hope our stuff carries weight. But I also act as like a conduit for really small people who not small people, but people who are smaller in byte usage at S3 than I am, because they comment on my blog, and I sort of aggregate those comments and send them on to Amazon, so they carry a little more weight, which is sort of interesting. As far as people asking us for features for SmugMug's API to publish or share photos or whatever, I'm afraid we're not nearly as good at implementing those features as we really should be. And that's mainly because we, again, haven't found a real business case for having the API. So when I get some spare time and I think there would be some neat new features, I add them. But there's clearly, if we could figure out how to make money on the API, then in a measurable way, then maybe I could hire some developers whose sole job is to do API stuff, and that would be really interesting. There are lots of photographers and businesses who are built on top of us, so we should be able to figure that out, but we're a small company and we just haven't managed to stitch the pieces together yet.
Great, thanks. Let's start with the audience. If you've got a question, if you could come to the mic so everybody could hear you, and then let us know who you're directing your question to. Everybody kick it off? Koji? He's not a plant. Why do I know his name?
I actually have a specific question for SmugMug and Redfin. You said you actually use Amazon or some infrastructure company to provide storage capabilities. The specific question that I was interested in asking is, what are the things you would not actually outsource? What are the things you want to own? What are the things you want to build? And how is that relevant with your competitive advantage? Because I think that's one of the key questions that if I were a startup, I would be wondering about.
So, assuming all things are equal, that Amazon is just as performant as we are, or just as reliable, or even better, more performant or more reliable, I would trust every piece of my infrastructure to them, or Microsoft, or Google, or any of the big web-scale computing places. I could see 5 or 10 years from now, SmugMug not having any physical data center space at all, and having the relevant pieces at different companies. So maybe when you use the search box on SmugMug, that's provided by a Google service, right? And we've fed data directly to them, and their search thing searches our data, and all of our compute and storage is at Amazon, and maybe we've replicated storage to Microsoft at the same time, so we have no single point of failure, or who knows what. But that sounds a little scary to some companies. But for us, it takes up so much time and energy and money. Our customers appreciate the fact that the more we're able to get rid of that stuff, the better we can take care of them. And plus, so we're a premium photo sharing site, and the people are paying us to preserve their priceless memories. So they like the fact that the photos are stored not just at SmugMug and not just in one state or one area or whatever, but they're stored at multiple companies, one of which whose market cap is in the billions and is in multiple states and all of that sort of stuff. So our customers really like it, which is another big win.
May I ask a successive question, or
Did you want Redfin to answer that as well?
Yes, I do. Yes, please.
So we don't definitely outsource as much of our infrastructure as SmugMug does. I think we'd like to go more in that direction. But for us, something that we would never outsource is the customer experience. We believe that's the value we're bringing to the company, and that's what we want to preserve. So we want to preserve the customer experience. We want to provide the customer support and the interface with our clients, as well as we want to bring in sort of best-of-breed data from every area. We have a map, but on top of the map, we layer on top of it, actually right now, 50 different data feeds. And where possible, we'd like to collapse some of those data feeds down, so say we get all of our tax history information from one company, but we still want to be able to pick and choose about who's the best provider of tax history or who's the best provider of past sales information, and collect that all and just focus on building the best-of-breed experience.
That makes sense. For SmugMug, for example, would you be willing to store your user list in Amazon's S3 storage?
Like our database?
Exactly.
Yeah, we'd have to give it some serious thought on how to implement it and stuff. And right now, they don't have an offering that's performant enough to stick our database there, right? We can't stick our database in S3 and expect it to be as lightning fast as we need. So they don't have an offering for that. I would love to have an offering for that, but obviously it raises concerns about data security and things like that, which immediately make people's hair catch on fire, and they get scared. But the fact is that I have a pretty good feeling that Amazon cares about data security at least as much as we do, right? They have a lot more customer information and a lot more financial customer information than SmugMug will ever have. So I like to think that would be a positive move for our customers rather than a negative. But something like that, we would talk to our customers about and clear it with them first, and talk about what sort of security and or encryption or whatever mechanisms to use.
So to follow up on that, we actually, at Redfin, it's not just a website where you come and search for real estate, but it's also, we're an online real estate brokerage. So once you buy a place, you actually work with us throughout the process. And we actually use Salesforce as our sort of back-end CRM provider. And so all of our customer information is actually not stored at the Redfin data centers, but actually stored at the Salesforce data centers. And again, we feel that they do a much better job of providing a higher SLA, higher level of security than we could, and it allows us to focus on the customer experience and the customer support aspect.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Please.
So I'll sort of address it to both sides. For the bigger service providers, let's say you're wildly successful. Is there an aspect of liability in a non-compete fashion where suddenly you see everything's so great, you own all the data, everything's wonderful, and you go, God, the next step is us to monetize and do our own service? And is there any sort of aspect of that that you think about? And to the smaller people who are hosting, I mean, to be honest, Amazon's great at user experience too. Are you ever worried that down the road they might look at your service, brand out something else, and suddenly are competing with you? And do you have anything like that that's in your agreements?
All right, so our business is the part of the business I'm associated with is all about developers and getting developers to be aware of what we have and to build really cool things on top of that. Now, certainly it does put us in this interesting situation where we can see how much data and how well developers are doing. By and large, we're using that information simply to help those people to succeed even more. I don't know that it does or doesn't get into other parts where we would say, look at those guys, they're doing so great at this, we should be doing that ourselves. And quite honestly, at any big company, the problem isn't usually let's find some more things to do. It's like let's take this unbelievably huge list of things that we would like to do and trim that down into a set of focus areas that is small enough that we can actually execute on all of those things. So we're not really looking to find thousands of new different kinds of businesses to get in at this point. And our goal is to see developers succeed with what it is that we do.
And so from our perspective, certainly the APIs we're exposing offer full commercial terms, which means that a site can actually build whatever they want on top of it using whatever monetization scheme they want on top of it if they pay us essentially. above a certain threshold, we're essentially saying if you're a small site, I'll give an example of live contacts, spaces, photographs, presence APIs, and the WebIM pieces we'll be announcing and talking about here. What we've essentially said is that if you're a site that has less than 1 million unique users per month, you can build your business on top of the service. You can call these things for free with no payment to Microsoft, as long as your site is essentially an all-you-can-eat model based upon per unique user as opposed to per API call. If you go above 1 million unique users, then we're charging 25 cents per unique user per year. So essentially the price of a gumball, you get access to for a user for a year. There's nothing really costs 25 cents anymore. So I had, anyway, but again, it's full commercial terms. So you can do whatever you want. You can build a competitive service with what we're doing. That's part of what the explicit API set as well as the explicit commercial terms actually say. And that's actually on today now, dev.live.com/terms. You can actually go read our terms of use if you want.
You can store almost 2 gigabytes with us for a month for a quarter.
Yeah, there you go. So, price of a gumball.
So one really simple question. You've spoken about the 25 cent rate a few times today, but your deck said 0.025, I think.
I'm sorry, what?
So your slide deck this morning had 0.025.
Oh, is that a typo?
Of a dollar, and you've been talking about
$0.025,
and you've been talking about 25 cents. Which one is it?
The website should have the accurate number. That's the 25 cents.
It is 25 cents. Okay.
$0.25.
Right. So yeah, cool. Now the slightly harder question is you've spoken a lot about.
I hate to interrupt, but we only got to half of his question. So can we finish his question and then get to yours? And now I'm forgetting what the question was.
Do you worry about somebody who also built wonderful user interfaces?
Oh, yeah. So do we worry about Amazon or Google or Microsoft or Yahoo looking at our business since we're using them and they can see all our data and stuff and building our service a competitor to us? At least from our point of view, we're not scared at all. We sort of have the luxury of being in a space that's not all that attractive to the large companies. SmugMug is, again, a premium service. We're never going to be the #1 photo sharing site in the world, and we have no aspirations to be there either. We would be a lot more scared of two guys in a garage who thought that our little slice of the pie looks interesting than we would Amazon trying to decide to do photo sharing. If they did decide to do it, they would do it in a dramatically different way than we do, I think. And we use Google's web services. They have theoretically a competitor to us in Picasa Web. Yahoo has 2, Flickr and Yahoo Photos, but none of them, we don't see them as competing in our space. They don't address the needs of the type of customers we're after, so we're not too concerned, no. But that may just be because we have a very narrow focus. I don't know.
We're not that concerned. I think we would be concerned if we were a pure online real estate search engine. But since we provide this brokerage aspect, we have to have agents in every state that we operate in to actually go and meet clients. We're pretty confident that Microsoft isn't going to get into the business of becoming a real estate brokerage company where we do business. So we're pretty confident about that.
Great. Okay, let's go to the next question.
So you guys spoke a lot about using blogs as your feedback mechanism. Does that sort of echo chamber really scale out to the sorts of levels of scale that you want as far as customer reach?
So the question is, do we get enough diversity of input from this set of blogs? We really, really do. We have an internal list we call the AWS Daily Buzz that goes around, and it's pretty much every place we can detect that someone is talking about us, that gets listed on this Daily Buzz. And it gets distributed very, very broadly within the company. And we also actually export that list as a set of Delicious tags. So there's a Delicious account, Delicious/AWS Buzz. And you can actually see the same set of things that we're looking at and make sure that we're picking up on all the different kinds of input. And those kinds of things get read extremely well within the company. I can tell you that people very high up in the company read these things and comment extensively internally on this is what people are thinking of us. We're a very, very much customer-driven type of company, and that kind of input and feedback, you can't pay enough to get that kind of feedback. When someone takes a couple hours, like Dodd does, and writes this unbelievably good blog post and just lays it all out and says, this is what I like and this is what I hate, and these are the things they can do better. There's nothing better than that, just raw, unvarnished input as far as knowing what you're doing well so you can pat yourself on the back a bit, and then knowing where you're not doing so well so you can go light some fires and say, this is where you need to get better. So I think it seems to work for us, certainly.
Yeah, and it works for us too. I think part of the issue is that customers have been so programmed over the last decade or longer that companies don't read and respond to their email, that people have a hard time finding a voice to tell companies what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and they've sort of moved to blogging as a means to sort of shout it out and hope that somebody listens. And thanks to blog search engines and things like that, it is easy for a company, if they want to listen. And we listen all day long. We have alerts and we do searches and everything to find every mention of SmugMug we can out in the blogosphere and then comment on those entries and everything. And we learn a lot that way. I wish it was a little more efficient for us to communicate our thoughts back to our customers. We're so sensitive to spam and we hate spam, so we never email blast our customers when we have new features and things. So we sort of try to put it on the website and we blog about it and stuff, but not enough people subscribe to our blogs to really, it's measured in the thousands and our customers are measured in the hundreds of thousands. So there's a disconnect there that I really wish we could bridge. But as far as feedback into the company, it's fantastic.
So from our perspective, we have actually three main input mechanisms we use. Primarily, we go out and actually, talk to customers. We have focus groups. I was just in London 2 weeks ago having a set of focus groups asking a bunch of questions of website builders and people like this to understand what their thoughts and concerns are. So we actually do very proactive outreach to people to actually ask them questions and such. On the more the more scalable approach, we track on the forums on. If you go to dev.live.com, there's a bunch of forums under there. We track religious statistics around number of posters, how quickly were the questions answered, how many responses were there, how many people read each posting, meaning how many lurkers were there in relative ratio to the actual posters. We track those statistics and make sure things get tracked. We have MVPs that actually go and follow up. We have back channel or backstops around product support services that get questions answered in case the community doesn't answer them, and we routinely cull common questions out of that into an FAQ that we also post on our site. So the forum traffic on our own sites is one of our means, and then from a blog perspective, we also get something similar to what Amazon describes here. We get routine information from our PR firm actually goes out and produces reports for us around, calling through Technorati and people like that. Like just this morning, I received notice that Silverlight is the number 6th search term now on Technorati. So we routinely track these sorts of things and incorporate that feedback and track all that coverage.
Yeah, all this technology has actually made it easier for people, I think, to find us and communicate with us. And one thing that has worked really well for my team is whenever we travel to some city, we do everything possible to just let every developer that reads our blogs and our forums know, we're going to be in the city. If you want to meet with us, feel free just to set up an appointment, and it doesn't matter if you use 1 byte of storage or use 200 terabytes. Either way, we don't think, this is some small guy. We just don't need to bother with him. Whoever they are, if they need to meet us in an airport or whatever, fine, that's great. We'll be happy to talk to you and just get whatever you'd like to tell us. That extreme customer engagement it works really well. The only question I have is can it scale forever?
It's expensive. That was my question. It gets really expensive really quickly to watch blogs and to meet face on face with customers who might generate $50 worth of revenue for you a year. I struggle to see how that sort of a close customer engagement model scales for this business.
I was actually warned against being one-on-one with customers when I started at Amazon 5 years ago. The rule then was that you didn't engage on forums, you didn't kind of do anything that was one-to-one and non-scalable, and everybody said that's just not the way we do it, so just don't do it. And I don't always listen to those kind of people anyway, and just went ahead and did it. And lately people say, that's actually made a huge difference in the way we're perceived. And there are ways to make it scale. One of the things that has worked extremely well is whenever I go to some particular city, I used to put a note on the blog and said, hey, if you want to meet with my team, email us, we'll figure out a meeting. And so every meeting was like 5 or 10 different emails back and forth. How's Thursday afternoon? No, okay, how's Wednesday? No, that doesn't work. So we actually just started putting out a wiki page for every city we go to and say, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. from Monday to Friday. If you want to meet with us, put yourself on our calendar. So we took out that scalability issue of how many emails can you process and said, we'll leave it up to the developers to schedule our time. And yes, there's room for them to abuse us, and it's a little scary to think that you're just some random person who's just kind of summoning you to some place to meet. But by and large, it's worked out extremely well, and it lets them express their need to meet without our having to be directly in the loop for each and every one of those scheduling transactions.
You said something interesting there where you said that it gets really expensive to do it, and the flip side to that coin, at least for some businesses, ours in particular, it's really expensive not to do it. Because there is no better way to get customer feedback and improve your product and turn them into not just customers, but like foaming at the mouth, rabid, religious zealot customers, than to interact with them one-on-one and acknowledge you have problems or fix their problems or whatever the case may be. But from so we view customer service and customer support almost as part of our marketing budget rather than like a customer support budget, and it's made all the difference. So for some businesses, it's too expensive not to do it.
Yeah, and I think we go to the other extreme of we actually have our phone number on every web page we have, and every time the phone rings, I pick it up and I talk to a customer who's either happy or upset, and we walk through their problems and take care of it. And sure, it doesn't scale, but in our business, every customer represents thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of revenue, and so we have to answer the phone.
Yeah. A follow-up question, I think, would be, how are you able to take this, what sounds like noise, potentially. You've got lots of customers. It's easy. It's very easy for them to interact with you, to engage you. But maybe somebody who's from, only represents themselves rather than a whole sector or segment is shouting very loud. And a whole bunch of other customers who may be high-value customers are kind of quiet. What sort of prioritization is going on around the messages that are coming in, the requests for features and whatnot? And are you actually doing data mining, or is it anecdotal? How do you make sense of this mass of information and feedback?
So our really high-value customers for us are the people who subscribe to our pro service, and they're professional photographers who sell all of their prints through our service. So when somebody shouts really loud about a feature, we turn around and take that to our high-value customers and go, hey, somebody says that this would be a great feature. Is it really a great feature? And
so how exactly do you do that?
So we do it usually on our message forums, but sometimes we'll pick up the phone and call them, or if it's, so obviously there are tiers, but the really top tier of customer we never ever want to piss off. So we would give them a call or whatever. But sometimes the feature is just obvious that it would be good, and or it sounds like fun to me. I'm lucky enough that we're a small company. If something sounds fun, we can just do it. So.
On my side, it seems that the more people you talk to, the patterns will start to emerge. And after you're out on the road for a week and you hear a bunch of different requests, you'll see all these kind of point requests for I want to do this, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And if you zoom back a little bit and take off your glasses, you say, if I look at it in this kind of fuzzy way, what they're really saying is that I don't need to give you 3 new features. I need one more kind of meta capability. If I do that just right, we'll really address everybody's problems. So getting this diversity of feedback actually gives you the whole spectrum of different things that people want to do. And the real trick, it seems, is to be able to see the pattern emerge out of that noise and say, okay, we don't need to do lots and lots of features. We simply need to give something general that is like a hook or a trick or some way that they can get it at the right level and customize it to do what they want.
And my perspective actually very mirrors Jeff's in the sense that we actually have broader mechanisms to actually be able to find lots of interesting data points and then be able to cull that down and understand the meta points around what are the actual feature sets or the top-level experiences that need to be enabled from the scenarios. And so we have for the last 15 years, Microsoft has had a very large evangelism core that goes out on a worldwide basis in every geography and knocks on the doors of many, many companies and routinely talks to lots and lots of customers, and very well established inside the company back channels where that information is aggregated up. So in some sense, we we do have a little bit of a luxury of sitting on top of a bit of an information pyramid of terms of lots of things coming up from the field that we can then abstract out and actually convert into features and scenarios and such.
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
What are your tips for a company who plan to or try to buy web services in terms of the readiness or in order to leverage web services effectively?
I don't think I understood the question.
So, based on your experience to companies, what's the tips for a company who plan to buy web services or try to web services? Is there options to?
So are you wondering sort of how you should prepare before you engage with a company? Or are you wondering about the licensing process, or sort of beta testing, or what? Is this more on a technology side or a business side, or what angle are you coming from?
Both sides.
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, it's just really around how to get ready in order to do that.
Because you just mentioned about the benefits from the outsourcing, but maybe some weaknesses or some kind of stuff. So you have to overcome that kind of challenges from the outsourcing.
Yeah. So I guess. So for us, it's often not really all that planned that we're going to use a web service. So S3 was like a cold call from somebody at Amazon who said, "Hey, it looks like you could use storage. Would you like to try out?" and my response was, we're pretty happy with our storage as it is. We spent a lot of time building it, and Amazon said 15 cents per gigabyte, and I said, sold. And then other services, like we had a mapping feature we released, 2 or 3 years ago. It's been a while, and we ended up using Google Maps, but Virtual Earth had just launched. It was in beta, and we thought that was pretty neat, and like their documentation was better and stuff. But for us, it came down to like licensing terms, which it sounds like are very different now than when they first launched. But like if we wanted to use some Virtual Earth stuff, we had to include Virtual Earth search box on the thing, which would like damage our customer experience. So you just have to, I don't know, I guess my tip is to when you decide you need a service, go and look at all the options and make sure that you know the entire field instead of just like rushing towards one because that's what everybody else is doing. It's not necessarily, that the buzziest one is not necessarily the best web service. So, and everybody's needs are different. So we needed to have one that didn't have the search box requirement, so we chose Google.
Yeah, for us it was a big decision. The map sort of forms the center of our search experience, and so it wasn't a decision we took lightly. We spent actually several months looking at all the different options and slowly narrowing them down based on a long list of criteria that we needed to have in a map platform provider. And we also went out, once we narrowed in on a couple, went out and actually prototyped them and tried to deeply assess how much work it would be to integrate within our site. This was going to be a large investment, not just from a dollar perspective for a small startup, but from a resource perspective as well. It took a third of our team with several months to make the transition for us, and it was something that we had to carefully consider. And so I definitely encourage you to think long and hard about it and talk to other people who have made the decision and try and see what things they didn't consider in the beginning.
So one web service actually that I didn't talk about that we consume is actually our printing partner for photographs. And we're actually on our third printing partner and actively looking for more. That turned out to be very painful because we made a couple of bad decisions about who to partner with. And they couldn't deliver a quality or level of service we wanted. So we implemented both of the previous partners so fast, within like a day or two. And we thought, all right, great, we can get on to other stuff. And it turned out we would have been much better off to do a thorough due diligence of the various providers out there and been thorough.
Go ahead.
Okay, hey guys. My question's probably directed at you two, but you may be able to answer this as well. Is your thoughts on services using for single sign-on, specifically OpenID, and sort of what your take is on that, and how you see that fits in with the whole web service architecture and authenticating your users to the site.
So we are an OpenID provider at SmugMug, and we hope to be a consumer really soon. In fact, I've been stuck in conferences, so I haven't been able to finish the code, but we're excited to do so. However, at least right now, OpenID isn't really single sign-on, right? It's a way of providing identity, but not authentication
I guess that's the way they're going, or trying
reputation. So everybody sort of wants to go that direction, but it's not really clear on how to go that direction yet. But I think it would be great if something stabilized. But at the same time, I'm not totally sure that I care all that much when I'm consuming web services. As long as the authentication mechanism is reasonably simple and easy to consume, I don't care all that much. In fact, the Amazon guys pick my brain about future web services from time to time, and one of the questions they had was, do you want the authentication mechanism to match across all of them? So they have 10 now, and there are a bunch more in development, and should they standardize on it? And my answer to them at the time, and it would still be accurate, is no, not necessarily. If it is going to delay the service or cause upheaval in the API spec or something like that, I think mostly I just care about whether it's simple rather than whether it's necessarily standards-based. So SOAP is a good example of something that I think is sort of, I don't personally like SOAP at all. It's a standard which sounds great on paper, right? But it's so heavyweight, it's sort of a pain to develop for and to. So.
I have to admit, we actually haven't spent any time really looking at OpenID for our business. We do have some things that are outsourced, like Salesforce, that depend on matching up, Redfin user IDs with the Salesforce user ID. For the most part, with all the companies we've outsourced that depend on our user identification, we found it's been very easy to integrate with them. So we haven't really had a need to switch from the model we have today.
I think OpenID is better for consumers than
I mean, the thing that I noticed was, from a developer point of view, is that if you're having users and they want to expose an API, you've got to use another mechanism, because obviously OpenID has to go through a server, so that's no good for a REST implementation, for instance. So I think there's grab, but it's just interesting to see, because you guys have been at the forefront of it, to see how you've sort of handled that. So. All right, thank you. Sure.
This question goes to the providers. How far are we from having a SQL service and an execution engine? I believe most of this storage is about static content, right? How far are we from having hosting ASP.NET, for example?
Well, let's see. We don't have any announced plans in that area. It's certainly something that comes up pretty regularly as something developers would want to have. I do worry about the latency of doing kind of database-like queries online. People kind of want microsecond level response from databases, and when you've got DNS lookups and long fiber optic cables in your path, that's not going to necessarily happen. There's definitely a lot of call for give me more flexible ways to index and store data online, and we're certainly doing a lot of listening in that space at this point. There are people that have kind of literally taken things like MySQL and hosted that on top of Amazon S3, or they've even put high availability MySQL on a bunch of replicated server instances in our cloud. I'm not quite sure that's what you were really asking for. A lot of developers seem to want something a little bit more kind of web flavored with REST APIs and things like that, rather than just kind of replicate an existing old style SQL query.
So from my perspective, I would just echo what Rayouzi said yesterday, which was lots of projects at Microsoft, and when we're ready to talk about them, we'll talk about them.
Just from the consumer point of view, that's probably the biggest stumbling block for us getting rid of our data centers entirely, right? We don't mind, we're not too concerned with a REST sort of implementation. What I'd really like is to be able to stick all my web servers on Amazon EC2, all of my static storage on S3, and then my database is in the same data centers there at Amazon, so that I'm not dealing with the latency of the internet and everything. I'd like to just transplant my data center over there, and doing really fast, really scalable database architecture is easily the most difficult problem to solve there.
Hi. My first question is for Redfin.
I come from Portugal. I have a software company. We develop real estate software for companies. We have about 1,500 companies working. And a new opportunity that we are developing is software as a service for real estate companies. You, as a real estate company, how do you see all these web services? As I got it, you use Salesforce for your management tool, yeah, CRM solution, and VirtualWare, like other web solution. You don't have the data in your company. I'm facing a problem that what my clients will say when I put all the infrastructure in my data center with their data, because every day they tell me, well, it will be nice, but I want to have my data near me because this is business. Do you think in these problems every day, or you just lie down and say, okay, there will be no problem, I don't care about privacy?
Well, we definitely do care about privacy. But from our perspective, we don't license or syndicate out any of our services. We build technology and we license technology for our own business, and then it stays in-house. And so from our perspective, our data is close to where we are, whether it's in our data center or it's hosted by Salesforce. We're confident in the security and privacy of both of our data centers. I think we're coming at this from a little bit different perspective, where we're sort of an end user and you're providing services to end users. And we're in a slightly different business situation.
Okay, Beck, go ahead.
Question for service providers. How many international service consumers are currently depending on your services? If there are many, what would be the biggest obstacles for them doing this?
Okay, so we have a developer community of over 240,000 developers that are using our services right now, and they range from hobbyists to people in schools to startups who essentially bet their business on the fact that we need to succeed, on up to Fortune 500 companies that are doing things like analyzing data in the compute cloud. So there's just an extremely wide range of things, and I even have to say that even though I just quoted that wide range, I personally get to see, it seems like maybe 5% of all the different things that are really happening in our space. So it's an extremely diverse audience that we've got.
So you should actually quote the number of Virtual Earth companies and such, since you're more familiar with that.
Sure. From the Virtual Earth platform perspective, we've got two main types of customers. We've got commercial customers that are private labeling the service and building their businesses around that, where brand is critical, where they're looking for a service level agreement. Customers like Redfin. We have over 1,000 companies that are licensing our platform in that space, and then there's we actually don't know the number, but thousands of companies that are using the service, the free service, developing mashups, and who are monetizing their sites jointly with us through advertising. And so in that space, basically both the commercial and non-commercial implementations are driving about half of the volume of the transactions on the site. The other half is coming from Microsoft's own services, primarily from the Live Search Maps site that you see on the available through the Live portal.
So actually there were 1,172 sites listed on via Virtual Earth in the mashup gallery.
Yeah, there's mashup galleries on Programmable Web, via Virtual Earth, dev.live.com. The issue with those is it's mostly a self-inclusion kind of a thing, and so for those who have done a project and aren't promoting themselves, we don't know about them unless we mine the data logs, and it's growing rapidly.
And so in the broader sense, we actually have a similar sort of model at a macro level across Windows Live. We have deep contractual obligations, relationships with many, in cases, telcos, like, for example, announced relationships with France Telecom, with the Orange Messenger by Windows Live branding, Vodafone, let's see, there's Bell of Canada, and a number of telcos around the world actually building on top of our VoIP infrastructure, on top of Messenger and such. So we have this, we call them the depth engagements, and then there's the breadth pieces, which are basically APIs that are open for anybody to come use and play with. Because a large number of the APIs are actually being announced today. There's actually a bunch of new APIs. And because we're actually making it very, very easy to onboard, you don't have to register, you don't have to establish commercial terms or a business relationship with Microsoft. We don't actually know today how many are actually using the service without going and doing the data mining. And that's by intent. We just want to make this very easy for people to get up and experiment and play around with and start using it and start giving us feedback.
Okay, taking a little bit of a different direction. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll maybe try to leave a minute for any kind of wrap-up things that you wish you were asked or points you wanted to make. But I wanted to ask about monetization, and in particular, since you're building your commercial site and you're using web services, licensing them, building them, what are the issues that are that this raises around your ability to monetize the site in the way that you would like to do that? Do you work around it? Does it support your model? Is it conflicting with your model at all? What are the issues around monetization?
All right, I'll take a stab at that. So I think the first important message you need to get out to developers is that they can use these services for commercial use. You need to make that really, really obvious in your licenses. You need to make it clear that it's not some kind of a hobby use only kind of a thing. I think you need to be very clear on the fact that whatever services you put out, that you do expect that to be a real business, and that it's not some kind of an experiment that you might or might not decide to proceed with. You need to make it really evident that you're doing something that you want to turn into an important business for your company, so people can say, this is, if it's important to them, I can trust it, I can have faith in it over the long term. And then you need to actually figure out in what dimensions you actually need to be able to measure and then charge for, and how you actually go about charging for the services. So in our case, we found for each different service, there were several different axes of measurement that we could measure and then charge. So for example, if you're doing storage, we can measure and charge you for how much data you transfer back and forth. We can measure how much you store and how long you store it for. If you're using our servers, we can say how many servers are you using for how many hours, and simply tabulate a running bill for you in that way. Making the pricing very, very clear, making it as transparent as possible, making sure that there's not going to be surprises, that people don't understand exactly what it is that they're getting. First, having that billing relationship also with customers. That one of the things is we actually, since the beginning of the company, people have actually needed to buy physical goods from us, so we have all the facilities in place to take credit cards and store them securely and use them and so forth. Anybody else that wants to go into actually getting people to pay for services, they're going to need all that payment infrastructure, which is not just a pretty simple thing to build.
And so I guess I've been very clear so far. We're offering full commercial terms, and anybody can monetize the services however they want. If they pay us essentially a cost recovery, or we're happy to add revenue sharing with the companies as well. I mean, that's our primary business. What we're doing in Windows Live is be allowing syndication of advertisements on third-party sites and with revenue sharing. So we're not announcing that today, but that's certainly our intention. That's why we're setting all this stuff up, so that we can have that conversation when we put those products in market.
Yeah.
So for us, as I've said before, we don't totally know how to monetize our API. And in fact, we give away free accounts to anybody who wants to develop stuff on our API. So it's like a $150 a year account that you just get for free if you want to do something neat with our API. And I guess it would be great if our API did generate money in some measurable way, but we just think it's neat to see people like doing cool stuff with our API. So we have the luxury of being a smaller player, and we don't have, like, the API requests just get lost in the scale of our web-based interface. So it's not like a big drain on our resources or anything. As far as consuming, Obviously, S3 enables us to monetize our web-based product even better. All SmugMug customers get unlimited storage. They have for the last 5 years. So anything that drives storage costs down for us is a big win in terms of monetization on signups.
For us, in terms of monetization, it's important that our service providers they have commercial terms, and we don't have to display any advertising since we monetize our customers by selling them real estate. And so we really want to have that control over the customer experience. Even to the extent I wish with Virtual Earth we could turn off just the logos that get displayed over top of the map so it was a pure map experience. But we're happy that we don't have to display any ads in order to use the service.
Would either of you consider revenue sharing agreements like you just mentioned?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying a potential future is providing an API and then asking for revenue sharing from the consumers of the API. Is that a model that you would be interested in?
I guess, yeah, I guess so. I'm not aware of any web services that do that yet. But yeah, I mean, assuming the web service was compelling, then that might make sense.
I think it might depend on what stage your company's at. So we had raised enough money that it was fine for us to just write a big check to consume services from these companies. And so we'd rather just pay for it outright than have to do a rev share.
In fact, come to think of it, I've never been asked that question, so I'm sort of thinking on the fly. But there are some services we've talked about internally that we wish somebody would provide that we certainly would do rev shares. So yeah, we would.
Okay, let's just, any final thoughts?
I don't think so, but I'm around and happy to talk about this stuff. So find me in the halls or send me an email or read my blog or something.
Yeah, same here. I guess my only point would be to do your due diligence and talk to other people who decide to go with a provider to make sure that you have a full understanding of the picture before you make a large commitment.
I'll be speaking on the Amazon services tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the big room. So hope to see you there, and also I'll be around and happy to discuss as well.
And I just say you should try experiment. Run some services, try some of the APIs. Just roll up your sleeves, actually try the stuff, and also very importantly, read the fine print. Not just ours, but everybody's fine print around what the terms and conditions are.
Thank you for your participation and attendance.
Thank you.